Welcome to Godless and Grounded.
Imagine a world where stories that were told thousands of years ago in villages and forests somehow became unquestionable truths. Stories that were shaped by imagination now treated as instructions on how the universe works. When we look at these stories with curiosity and reason instead of fear and reverence, we begin to see how easily humans can turn myths into reality, simply because enough people repeat them over time. Today we are going to explore some beliefs found in Hindu scriptures and ask a simple question. Do these ideas make sense when viewed through reason and science? One of the oldest stories claims that the entire universe emerged from a cosmic egg. Not a metaphorical one, but literally an egg floating in nothing. Now think carefully. How can an egg exist without a living organism that produced it? An egg is a biological product. It requires a parent organism. Yet ancient texts describe the egg as the origin of everything, including space-time energy and matter. When we compare this idea to modern cosmology, we find a huge contrast. The Big Bang theory is based on measurable evidence such as cosmic background radiation and expansion rates of galaxies. The cosmic egg idea has no evidence. It is a poetic story. But when people treat a poetic story as scientific truth, it becomes unreasonable. This is not about disrespect. It is about distinguishing storytelling from reality. Another belief is that there are 33 crore gods, which means 330 million gods. It is said that each god has specific responsibilities. Some control rain, some control wealth, some control health, and some control destruction. When we look at nature, however, everything operates through physical laws. Rain falls due to evaporation, condensation, and air pressure, not because a god pours it from the sky. Wealth is influenced by human effort, economy, trade, and politics, not by prayer rituals. Health depends on biology, medicine, hygiene, and lifestyle, not solely on divine blessing. If gods were actually controlling these functions, then prayer would reliably cure disease or prevent disasters. But no matter how devoted someone is, diseases like cancer do not stop simply because someone prays more. This shows that the natural world functions based on cause and effect, not divine micromanagement. Many Hindu traditions believe that rivers are goddesses. The river Ganga, for example, is considered pure, holy, and cleansing. Millions of people bathe in it every year, believing that it washes away sins. Yet scientific studies show that the water is heavily polluted with industrial waste, sewage, and bacteria. If a river truly had divine purity, it should remain clean regardless of human pollution. But pollution affects it exactly like it affects any natural body of water. This shows that calling something sacred does not change its physical characteristics. If the river could wash away sins but not bacteria, then something is inconsistent. This does not mean the river is not important culturally. It means the supernatural claim attached to it does not align with evidence. Another idea is reincarnation, the belief that after death the soul enters another body. People sometimes say if someone suffers in this life, it is punishment for mistakes in a previous life. This creates a dangerous mindset. If a child is born sick or disabled, some people may believe the child deserved it due to past life mistakes. This removes compassion and responsibility from society. If everything is blamed on past lives, people may stop questioning injustice, abuse, inequality, and suffering. We must ask, if reincarnation were real, where is the measurable mechanism? What is the soul made of? How does it transfer? Why does no one remember past lives in a verifiable way? There are claims of past life memories, but none have survived scientific verification. The idea is emotionally comforting, but without evidence it remains only a belief. Now let us talk about the idea of divine avatars. It is believed that God takes birth on earth again and again in different forms to restore balance. For example, Krishna, Rama, and others are seen as incarnations of the divine. But if the universe is controlled by a perfect, all-powerful being, why would balance ever get disturbed? Why would an all-knowing being need to fix things repeatedly? This implies imperfection, not perfection. Also, if God appears in human form to guide humanity, why choose only certain regions, certain languages, and certain time periods? Why not appear today on global television where everyone can see and verify? If something is true and important for all humans, it should be communicated in a way all humans can access. A truth limited to ancient stories and local scriptures cannot be universal truth. Another belief is that cow is sacred and must not be harmed because it is seen as a mother figure. But cows are simply animals, like goats, buffalo, or camels. They digest food, produce waste, get diseases, and eventually die. In many regions around the world, cows are raised for meat without any moral conflict. Yet in some places, people treat cows as holy, while other animals are seen as ordinary. This difference does not come from nature, it comes from cultural conditioning. When belief replaces logic, society begins to value symbols over reality. The result is violence, conflict, and division over something that could instead be handled with compassion and reason. Respecting animals is noble, but calling one animal divine while ignoring the suffering of others does not align with fairness or ethics. There is also the belief that chanting certain sounds like Om can control the universe. Sound waves can influence mood and concentration, but they cannot shape external reality by themselves. If a sound could control reality, then we would be able to chant away hunger, disease, poverty, or war. But chanting affects only internal states, not external conditions. Meditation can calm the mind, but it does not replace medicine or action. The idea becomes harmful when people stop taking practical steps to improve their lives because they rely on spiritual shortcuts. Reality changes when we act, not just when we chant. Many stories describe gods with multiple heads, arms, or animal heads attached to human bodies. These images are symbolic representations of qualities like strength, knowledge, or power. But when people take these stories literally, they begin to believe in beings that defy biology. A body with many heads would not function because of blood supply, coordination of nervous system, and energy demands. A human body with an elephant head would not survive because of mismatch of spine structure, breathing pathways, and brain function. These are symbolic artworks, not biological possibilities. The problem arises when symbolism is mistaken for literal truth. We also see stories where mountains are lifted with fingers, oceans are parted, weapons appear magically, and time is manipulated by will. These make exciting narratives for storytelling but do not match how physics and matter operate. If any of these events actually occurred, they would leave geological, historical, or physical evidence, yet none exists. This tells us that such stories are part of mythology, not history. Finally, we see the belief that reading or listening to certain scriptures can erase sin or guarantee salvation. But morality is based on actions, not recitations. A person who harms others but reads holy verses is not moral. A person who helps others, acts kindly, and lives with integrity is moral regardless of religious affiliation. If goodness depended on ritual and not behavior, the world would be unjust. True ethics come from empathy and understanding, not fear of divine punishment. There is also the belief that touching the feet of statues or idols can grant blessings or change fate. If this were true, then every wealthy, powerful, and successful person would simply spend their time visiting temples and touching idols. But in reality, success is built through work, skill, education, and opportunity. Objects made from stone, metal, or wood have no awareness. They cannot judge who deserves what. They cannot listen or respond. The meaning assigned to them comes from the human mind, not from the object itself. The object is not divine. The feeling of devotion is created by the brain. If someone finds comfort in ritual, that is their emotional experience. But emotional comfort should not be confused with objective truth. Another idea found in Hindu tradition is astrology. The belief that the position of stars and planets at the time of birth shapes personality and destiny. But planets are giant spheres of rock and gas extremely far away. They do not communicate intent. They do not send messages to newborn babies. Planetary motion follows gravity, not spiritual purpose. Also, different cultures have different astrology systems which contradict one another. If astrology were truly accurate, it would produce consistent predictions everywhere in the world, regardless of culture. But no astrologer can reliably predict life events in controlled testing. This shows that astrology is a psychological comfort system, not a method of understanding destiny. Finally, there is the belief that everything in the universe happens because it was meant to happen. Some call it fate or cosmic plan, but this belief can weaken personal responsibility. If someone fails, they may say it was destiny. If someone causes harm, they may say it was meant to happen. This mindset prevents growth and accountability. Life improves when we learn, reflect, adapt, and act. Not because a cosmic script guides us, but because our choices shape outcomes. Fate is a story we tell ourselves to avoid accepting uncertainty. But embracing uncertainty allows us to build real strength. Life is not written in advance. It is created through experience. When we look closely at how these beliefs formed, we notice something very human. People thousands of years ago lived in uncertain environments. They did not understand weather, disease, astronomy, or physics. So they created stories to explain the world. These stories were not foolish in their original context. They were attempts to make sense of reality with the limited knowledge available at that time. The issue is not that ancient people created stories. The issue is that many people still treat those stories as literal truth today, even though we now have scientific understanding that explains the same phenomena more accurately. It is like insisting that the Earth is flat, simply because our ancestors once believed it. Holding tightly to old explanations prevents progress and understanding. Think about how we treat books in modern times. If new discoveries are made, we update textbooks. But religious scriptures are treated differently. They are seen as unchangeable. If a belief does not match reality, people twist reality to match the belief. They tell children to accept instead of question. But learning comes from questioning. If a child asks how the universe works and we say do not question it, just have faith, then we are not teaching the child to think. We are teaching the child to obey. Obedience does not lead to understanding. Curiosity does. Some stories describe cosmic battles where gods fight demons and destroy entire worlds. But no archaeological or geological evidence shows that such wars ever took place. When real massive events occur, such as volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, or large-scale migrations, we see evidence in rock layers, fossils, ruins, and climate patterns. But the worlds described in many mythological texts do not leave traces. This tells us that these stories belong to the realm of imagination rather than reality. Myths are meaningful as cultural storytelling, but they should not be confused with history. Then there is the idea that chanting names of gods can erase the consequence of harmful actions. But if morality could be reset by recitation, then anyone could do harm without accountability. Imagine if a person cheated, stole, or abused others, and then believed everything was forgiven because they repeated holy words. Real morality means taking responsibility and repairing harm, not just performing ritual. A society that prioritizes ritual over responsibility becomes unjust because it allows harm without consequence. Ethics must be grounded in empathy and reason, not in fear of divine judgment or belief in magical purification. We also see practices where individuals perform offerings to convince gods to fulfill desires. For example, people offer milk to stone statues hoping for wealth, health, or marriage success. But the milk does not go to any divine being. It simply flows over stone and often ends up wasted. Meanwhile, people in the same regions may not have enough food to eat. If we use the same resources to support health, education, and poverty relief, we would see real improvement. When belief directs resources away from solving real problems, it becomes harmful, not just unreasonable. Another belief is that certain texts contain all scientific knowledge that will ever be needed. Some claim that ancient scriptures already explained gravity, radiation, aviation, and genetics, long before science discovered them. But when we examine these claims closely, we find that they rely on vague poetic verses interpreted in hindsight. If the knowledge was truly present, we would expect ancient societies to have airplanes, vaccines, electricity, and modern healthcare. But they did not. Instead, they suffered from disease, famine, and lack of technology. Science is not hidden in metaphor. Science is built on evidence, experiment, and verification. If a claim cannot be tested, it cannot be called knowledge. Some traditions teach that suffering, poverty, and illness are part of a spiritual journey. But telling someone who is poor that their suffering is spiritually meaningful may stop us from helping them. It becomes a justification to ignore injustice. Imagine seeing someone in need and saying their suffering is meant to teach them something instead of helping them. This mindset reduces compassion and responsibility. A society grows stronger when people help one another, not when they excuse suffering by calling it divine plan. There is also the belief in miracles performed by sages and holy men. Claims of levitation, walking on water, turning objects into gold, and healing through touch. But none of these claims hold up under controlled observation. When tested under supervision, these powers vanish. If such abilities were real, they would revolutionize science and medicine. Instead, they remain stage tricks, illusions, and psychological persuasion. People often believe these miracles because they want to believe. The desire for wonder often replaces the search for truth. Religion in any culture often takes advantage of fear. Fear of death, fear of uncertainty, fear of meaninglessness. The promise of eternal soul, eternal life, or reincarnation gives emotional comfort. But comfort is not evidence. A belief can feel good and still be untrue. When we confront the reality of life, we understand that meaning is not given from outside.
It is created by how we live, think, choose, and love. When we understand this, we no longer need myths to feel complete. Some Hindu traditions involve rituals where individuals fast, walk on fire, or perform painful acts believing it pleases the divine. But the human body does not need suffering to grow morally. Growth comes from understanding and reflection. Pain does not guarantee wisdom. Many animals endure pain in the wild but do not develop higher awareness from it. Wisdom requires thought, not injury. Ritual suffering is based on the idea that the body is sinful and must be punished. But the body is simply a biological system. There is no benefit in harming it to impress a supernatural being. There is a common belief that a guru or spiritual master should be obeyed without question. This creates a power hierarchy where individuals in authority can control others. When someone believes a guru speaks divine truth, they stop thinking for themselves. This allows exploitation, manipulation, and abuse. Every human being must have the right to question. If a belief system discourages questioning, it is protecting itself because it cannot survive scrutiny. Truth does not fear questions, only false beliefs fear examination. Let us also consider how identity becomes tied to belief. When people are raised in a belief system from childhood, they internalize it as part of who they are. So when someone questions the belief, it feels like a personal attack even though it is simply a discussion of ideas. This is why religious dialogue is often emotional rather than rational. But ideas and identity are not the same. A person can change beliefs and still remain the same individual. The mind grows when it is open.
At the heart of all of this, we see one theme. Humans desire meaning and control. When the world is confusing, we create stories to make sense of it. When life is unpredictable, we create rituals to feel control. When we fear death, we create narratives of afterlife. These responses are natural. But if we want to understand reality, we must look beyond comfort and tradition. We must look at evidence. True depth does not come from untested belief. True depth comes from curiosity, from asking why, from admitting when we do not know, from exploring, from learning. A world guided by reason, compassion, and shared humanity does not need supernatural claims to be meaningful. It becomes meaningful through our actions, our choices, and our connections with one another. Another idea that often appears is that everything written in ancient scriptures must be respected simply because it is old. But age does not guarantee truth. The earth is old. Human communities are old. Disease, superstition, injustice, and slavery are also old. Something being ancient only means it survived time, not that it is correct. Ideas must be measured by accuracy, usefulness, and evidence, not by age. If we follow everything old without question, then we would also reject electricity, medicine, and science because they are new. Knowledge evolves. Understanding grows. Wisdom is not in preserving the past unchanged, but learning from it and moving forward.
There is also a strong attachment to tradition for the sake of identity. People sometimes fear that if they question beliefs, they will lose culture or heritage. But culture is not weakened by thinking. It is strengthened by understanding. Music, art, language, storytelling, and festivals can remain beautiful parts of culture without accepting supernatural claims as literal truth. A dance or a song does not require a cosmic egg to be real. Cultural beauty and scientific truth can coexist. You do not have to abandon joy to embrace reality. You only need to separate symbolic tradition from factual understanding. Finally, we must think about what kind of world we want. A world where children are taught to memorize verses without understanding, or a world where children are encouraged to explore, question, and learn. A world where people fear invisible punishment, or a world where people act with kindness because they understand the value of human life. A world where stories are worshipped, or a world where stories are appreciated but truth is discovered through evidence. When we choose reason, we are not rejecting meaning. We are building meaning based on reality. Life becomes richer when we decide to look at the world with our own eyes and our own mind, not through the lens of what we are told to believe, not because tradition demands obedience, but because curiosity leads to understanding. When we stop kneeling before stories and start standing with awareness, we begin to live fully.